You're on 121.5, the emergency frequency.
Welcome to the 21.5 Show, a podcast for professional pilots by professional pilots. Join Dylan and Max, both with experience in flight instruction, the airlines, and business aviation, as they talk to a variety of industry experts, share stories, and have a little fun along the way.
Are you an airline passenger with an iPhone? Do you have questionable photos you'd like to share with random colleagues on a flight? Do you enjoy wirelessly transmitting them via airdrop? Southwest Airlines is not interested in your business. Please, don't airdrop pictures to random people on airplanes.
Thank you.
This has been a public service announcement.
Uninterested. It was not me. No.
It wasn't you. I wonder if that would be like a move for a deadheader.
I'll tell you what the move is. When you fly on an airplane all the time with an iPad constantly on, let me just ask you, how would you set your airdrop settings?
Well, actually, that was the question I had for you, because in the airlines, I know a lot of people, like as crew, you have to airdrop things to each other, right?
No, we never airdrop anything.
Oh, you don't?
There's zero use for airdrop in our operation.
In your operation? But don't some airlines, like they airdrop the flight plans to each other or something?
The only time I ever did that was in corporate, in JEP. And if you input the whole route in there, then you would airdrop it to your buddy. But dude, now you just say recently cleared, and one of the three that pop up, you just select. Like it tells you what the recently cleared routes are. So there's no reason to have it off of contacts only. That is my point.
Well, I think it is for some people. For some airlines, I think they do have to like airdrop it. I don't know. Some of our listeners will tell us. Anyways, that was quite an opening to the 21.5 Show. It's the show for professional pilots by two professional airmen with limited airdrop knowledge. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I'm not welcoming you. I'm welcoming our audience.
Well,
I'd like you to introduce yourself.
You're waiting to. Right.
I'm waiting for you to say something.
Thanks,
like,
Dylan.
"Hi,
It's a
my name's
real
Max."
honor to be on the show. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Okay. All right. So I'm joined by my friend, co-host, and brother-in-law, Max, and you're representing the 121 side of things. How was your 121 experience this week, Max?
Woo. It was a doozy.
Yeah.
It was just one of those trips.
Chain reaction.
A lot of mechanical issues. I was like 2 legs and done at 10:30 in the morning in Burbank all day, right?
Yeah.
And then I see they reassign me and they add on a flight to Denver and deadhead back. And I'm like, oh, this is great. You know, rather than sit around in Burbank and watch this super interesting documentary on Juan Tripp's quest across the Pacific at Pan Am that I was already going to watch, I figured I would get paid for it. So it was, I mean, not that I had a choice really, but so I go out on this deal and it was fine. And then trying to get home and the deadhead was like a nightmare. And there's mechanicals delayed and I couldn't, it was just like a 15.5-hour duty day. And then I flew today and it was just hot and took me an hour. I blocked an hour 45 from Orange County to Las Vegas.
Jeez.
It's a 40-minute flight. Just
wow.
Very congested today. A lot of congestion. So
Jiminy Christmas.
It was hot. It's 106 degrees in Southern California.
It's too much.
But what I always say is the good news is when you get messed with at the airlines, at least you're getting paid. And usually for those of you that aren't airline pilots, you're getting paid at premium. So maybe time and a half, maybe double time. So it always takes the sting out of it.
That's true. Well, my name's Dylan. I represent the business aviation side of professional piloting. I did not have any delays this week on my flights, and my golf clubs were in the back of the airplane, so I can't complain. But we digress. Lots to talk about today, Max. Beyond the airdropping incident that many heard of last week when the Southwest captain threatened to turn the airplane around and this person wouldn't stop airdropping random photos to passengers. Have you ever had this happen? Because I've had this happen several times.
Not nudes.
Like in a restaurant and stuff? No, I mean, well, I never accept it, so I don't know what it is. But
I have my stuff set to contacts only. Like, why do you want to get airdrops? I think you're cruising for nudes. That's what you're doing.
Cruising.
Are you just passing out business cards when you walk into a restaurant? Just throw them on the table? Airdrop nudes?
We need to
Random
talk
hits.
about, speaking of passing out business cards.
Oh,
That's
I know
next
where
on
you're
the
going.
list.
I know where you're going with this.
Okay. Do you want to talk about this while I pull this up here? Or
I mean, everyone's seen it that on the internet. Larry Benator, private pilot. His business card, in case you haven't seen it, reads this. It has Larry Benator in an airplane, a single engine airplane, and then underneath that, private pilot. That is in the sky, and then the rest of the text is in the clouds. The bottom of the business card
Classic.
says United States of America, FAA licensed pilot, airplane single engine land, date of issue 7/18/94. And then a couple spaces, it says Captain. I want you to know I have my pilot's license and I'm sitting in the back in case you need help at any time.
With airdrop set to contacts only.
No, it doesn't say that. But do you think that's real? Do you think this is real, or do you think someone just made this up? I know how we can get to the bottom of this. Get on the FAA register right
Somebody's already done
Oh.
it and posted his stuff. Yeah.
now. And
Listen, the detectives on ProPilot World.
did the date of issue jive?
I believe everything jived. So
I mean, that would be someone that, if you were going to spoof it, I would have thought of that too.
listen, I think many private pilots have sat in the back of an airliner and dreamed of being a hero and saving the day.
On my trip this week, we had a dude get on, and it was one of our captains, and he was deadheading, and he gets on, and he goes, "Hey guys, I'm in the back in case you need anything." And the captain's like, "What?" And I was cracking up. He's like,
Oh,
totally
because the
didn't
captain
get it.
didn't know.
Yeah, no, he had no idea.
We needed to get this guy on the phone. What's a scenario? Like I've always said, it would be fun. There's no access to simulators right now, but someday when things are slower and you could actually put people in a simulator, it would be so fun. One, to put a really drunk crew in a sim and just like see what would happen. And two, to put a private pilot in there in the like pilot's incapacitated scenario and just see what happened. Private pilots.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
It would be interesting to see.
I don't know about the drunk people. I mean, what?
You don't think that'd be interesting? I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyways, so that's all over the pilot social media. If you log into Instagram, you'll see that business card floating around. You will also see many stories about the stolen King Air that line guys stole in Mississippi this week and threatened to crash into a Walmart, I believe.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, this goes back to last episode, some mental health issues that potentially could be out there. I don't know the cause and his person's potential situation, but
This isn't even the first time, dude. Well, I mean, the guy in the Dash 8, he wasn't threatening to do anything really nefarious at any time.
Yeah.
He just wanted to hit you.
Someone posted a drone video of did you watch that? The flyby of the crash site? They put it down like really nicely straight because it's like in a farm field. So you can see all the tracks on the landing gear, but then there's like a creek running through the farm field. So then that's
where the landing gear.
That's where the landing gear
sitting.
departed the aircraft. Yeah. So it was actually looking pretty good for a little while there, but anyways, all right. Last thing from me. So I flew into an airport in West Virginia last week, and the way this works is coming from the taxiway when you're coming into the ramp, you're sort of taxiing in the opposite direction of where you're going to park, and then you kind of like pass by the line guy, do a 180, and then you're going to park right in front of him. So as I'm passing in the opposite direction, I kind of look at the line guy, and there's something in his mouth. And I say to the other pilot, I'm like, is that guy smoking a cigarette? Sure enough, I pull around. The guy is using chocks to, marshal me in. And sure, he's puffing smoke out of his mouth as he smokes a cigarette and parks me. I was like, that is the first. That was incredible.
Is this at a large chain FBO?
No, this is a municipality run FBO.
There you
It was
go.
incredible.
That's
So
nice.
shout out to all the line guys in West Virginia. That was a first for me.
0 given.
Yeah, pretty sweet. Anyway, so Max, we posted some pictures of that fishing trip. I think we even talked about it on the last episode where we were flying in and out of Minneapolis. And one of the pictures we posted on social media was of you reading this book called like Time and Navigation or something like that.
Yeah.
But I want to preface this by saying like you had packed for a full week. We're at this fishing lodge for a full week. You're carrying the classic super high heavy pilot rollerboard, which is the Luggage Works 22. This is the heaviest bag ever.
I hate that bag with the deepest
Metal frame. It's so heavy. And then you pack this book. What is it called? Time and Navigation?
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. And it's this library book that looks like a 1 foot by 1 foot.
Probably. I mean, it's certainly oversized.
It had to weigh 3 pounds. You're lugging this thing around on top of your heavy Luggage Works suitcase. And I was really impressed. I guess that's how you stay in shape.
So what's interesting, I'm on this quest to have an appreciation for the way aviation was, because just from when you and I learned to fly in older Cessnas that were made in the 80s initially that had all round dial stuff and no GPS, and then we went to round dial with GPS, and now people that learn at the same place we did is all G1000s and touchscreen. Nobody ever looks at round dials. Nobody has to fly an NDB approach. And that was a significant difference, right? But these people back in the day, dude, that were flying like the Pan Am Clipper across the Pacific at 8,000 feet, 17 hours to get to Hawaii, and like with no navigation, it's insane. Like what stuff they had to do. And so I'm really trying to learn. But one of the things too is I was like, how do people, like, we take it so for granted now to navigate anywhere is so simple with GPS. And even before that with VORs and INS and all that stuff, wasn't quite as mindless, but it still had come a long way. But when they started back in the day, I mean, dude, flying from Key West to Havana, 90 miles, like, dude, people got blown off course, flew for 3 hours and crashed and killed people because they couldn't find Key West, and they missed the whole Florida Peninsula because of some, you can't say unforecast winds because there was no forecast. It was just the winds were different on the surface than when they took off. And so it's crazy to me. But what I was flying with this dude, and he started talking about something about navigating way back in the day. And the thing I didn't realize until I read this book that you're so fond of, that people had been able to find latitude for a really long time. It was relatively easy to figure out your latitude, and we can go through that. But it's relatively easy to find your latitude. We'll just say that. But finding longitude was really, really difficult, and nobody could really figure out how to do it. And because really what it came down to is you need an accurate timepiece, like not in like today's like super, super accurate, but I mean, very accurate for a mechanical timepiece, and small enough that you could take it on boats. It was ships back when they figured this out. And a big ship crashed and killed 400 people off one of the islands off of Italy. I think it was Sardinia or Sicily, one of those. And so finally, they put up a big prize for whoever could figure out how to calculate longitude. And so me and this captain, he's like, oh, yeah. And he knew all about it. And we were talking about this whole like thing. And he was kind of the same thing where it's like, it's hard to appreciate what we have now. And, there's no way to go back and experience that. But if you educate yourself. So I'm going to try, like, if people are interested, and if not, feel free. You won't hurt my feelings. But I think it would be interesting once in a while to bring up some of the stories or things from this senseless research that I do when I have time about this stuff. I don't know. What do you think? Is it a dumb idea?
No, I think it's really interesting. I especially thought it was interesting when you were telling about like the longitude committee or blue ribbon panel.
Well, that was it. Yeah, they started it. Yeah, I will do a more formal, like I'll have something prepared where it's just like 5 minutes. I'm not going to bore everybody. I'm sure not everybody really cares, but I think it would be really interesting when Pan Am got the 707, right? It was interesting. There's a certain span where dudes flew the flying boats, 4-engine radial airplanes like that, and they ultimately retired on the 747. Like, that's a pretty substantial transition, but I think it would be interesting when they first came out with the 707, they're like, all right, here's your airliner. And there's no simulator. What does the Boeing test pilot show up and be like, all right, boys, this is going to be a little different with a swept wing jet versus I don't even know how that went down, but I will find out.
It was one phrase that caught me when you talk about airliners introducing a new fleet. Were you ever at an airline when they had a new fleet and they would use the term initial cadre?
No. The only time I remember that was at Embry-Riddle when we were instructors and we got the decathlon, and there was like only a couple of us that had a tail wheel that were instructors. So I remember the chief flight instructor calling us the initial cadre to fly this decathlon around.
Yeah, at American Eagle where I was at, they got the CRJ-700, and then I remember these guys would walk around and tell you, I was in the initial cadre for that. I didn't even know what that meant. I was like 23. I'm like, oh, okay.
Really? Should I salute you or what?
Oh, okay. Do you have a fifth stripe on your epaulette, sir?
Autograph my manual?
Yeah. Initial cadre. So shout out to everyone that was in the initial cadre on the CRJ-700 there. That is really interesting to think about. Well, did you watch the Pan Am documentary?
Yeah, there's a really interesting, it's called Flying the Pacific or something like that. It's on Amazon Prime, but it's like a 3-part series. I'm on the last part of it, but it's really fascinating, dude. How I mean, one trip had some cojones.
Yeah.
To do some of the stuff that he did.
We watched the one on the Clipper that got stuck with World War II and had to go the long way around.
Oh, I read that book.
Yeah.
That's a movie?
Yeah.
I read that book.
Yeah, I think we watched a documentary.
I think it's called The Long Way Around is the book. And these are people that were flying and World War II broke out and they couldn't get it back across the Pacific. So they had to fly the long way around the planet and like just kind of figure it out. That's a really interesting book too.
All right. Well, that is going to be our new upcoming segment. I'll have a link in the show notes to the very large book, Time and Navigation. I highly recommend you get that on the Kindle, unless you want to put that into your luggage works.
I like having like some real books around. Like I'm tired of reading stuff on the Kindle. Wears me out.
I'll tell you what, though. I know that no one in 121 in the flight deck brings out reading material. But if you did, and you bring out an extremely large, like 1 square foot, 3-pound book called Time and Navigation, like that's a cockpit power move.
I would not.
Not that anybody does
that. That would get in the way of like. I mean, you literally that would.
Yeah, it's too big.
It's too
with
big.
that 737 yoke. There's just not enough. You'd have to do
great photos, though.
Airbus.
I think that's what necessitates the size. I think that would be funny when I pack that and then I pull it out and you're like, "What is this?" And I'm like,
it was because I was lifting your bag out of that seaplane and there was a weight rating. And then I'm like, anyone that's lugging around the luggage works. I did it for a long time. Like, I'm sorry.
I was just talking with the guy today. I'm like, I hate this suitcase. What am I doing with this?
What do you think is going to happen to that bag?
I don't need a suitcase to last 20 years. I'd rather buy one and not have a rotator cuff tear, putting it in the overhead bin and replace it every 2 years. Which is why we're doing another gear review, which is my quest for a new bag.
Yes.
So we're reaching out and...
Yeah, that transitions in nicely. If you have a rollerboard that you're considering that you'd like us to review, let us know. I'm a big Briggs & Riley user. I'm going to review that bag. I have also used the Strong Bags bag and the Luggage Works. You've used a few as well.
AeroCoast also has a really cool sort of... I think it's like a modern version of the Luggage Works, but it utilizes aluminum instead of steel. So, I don't know.
Tungsten.
We'll get to the bottom of it.
Yeah. So we'll have that one coming up for you. One other thing I wanted to mention, Max, coming up on September 13th, we're having a happy hour in Scottsdale. Another networking happy hour.
It's not our happy hour, though.
No.
Try and
it's
steal
actually
the thunder.
We, as the pilot community, the aviation community, Arizona Business Aviation Association is sponsoring it. It's at Trevor's Liquors. I'll have a link for that. If you're in town, you should come. And I want to tell you a story about why you should come. We had one happy hour maybe a month ago. One of our friends, Nick, attended it, and he's a flight instructor, 800 hours, met somebody at the happy hour, left with a job offer for a citation.
Yeah.
Boom. It was great. So awesome place to network. I'll have the details in the notes, but you should come see us on September 13th. Last thing, Max, we're looking for someone that wants to be a part-time producer for the show, help get Max and I a little bit more organized, schedule interviews, maybe even do a little social media if you want. It's a perfect part-time remote job. If you're interested, let us know. If you think you'd like working with us, which I can't imagine many would, you're going to learn a lot about longitude. I can guarantee that. You may also have a research project on the origin of initial cadre. So I don't know.
Who knows?
Who knows where this could go? But shoot us an email, info@215podcast.com, and we'll take it from there. Oh, you also have to mail out the hats. Speaking of which, just sent one to Ruben the other day. Thanks so much to Ruben for his donation. For $55 on our website, you can make a donation and we'll send you a hat, either camo or gray. Got a few in each color left. These are really awesome. Mine's currently sitting at the bottom of a lake in Canada, but the 7 days I was wearing it was incredible. Why don't you read some reviews for us?
Reviews from JMR FTW. Pro pilots, subscribe now. Real talk with real professional pilots. Dylan and Max have interesting stories, guests, and topics from the wide world of professional aviation. The wealth of real-world experience is joined with genuine curiosity and humility from the hosts. Highly recommend. And Climb and Maintain says, worth my time. I like that. As a future professional pilot, I enjoy listening to these guys talk shop and give me a peek behind the curtain of the career I'm stepping into. They go right to the point, and the guest speakers from different parts of the industry are an added bonus. Thanks, guys.
I don't know if we get right to the point, but
as you know, if you leave a review, my friend Dylan, potentially our new producer, will send you some stickers. Info215 podcasts, or you can send him a DM on the socials. You like that?
Oh, unbelievable. Incredible terminology there.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Well, our mailbag's a little bit unique this week. Just some random tidbits here, and we'll get to those pay rates that you teased. But I did want to mention that our mailbag is brought to you by our friends at Advanced Aircrew Academy. Listen, if you're a chief pilot or director of operations for a corporate flight department, think back. Has any one of your pilots ever told you they enjoyed doing CTS, even one time? I'm guessing the answer is no. It's time to mix it up. It's time to keep those pilots on their toes. Don't give them another thing to complain about. They're already complaining about enough stuff. Make their training easy, engaging, entertaining, and informative. Check out all of the courses that Advanced Aircrew Academy has to offer professional pilots at aircrewacademy.com. On to the mailbag. Yeah, just some bits and pieces here. We got a really fun email from a listener, John, who wrote in to see if you were going to be doing his flight, Max.
Oh, that's right.
That would have been pretty cool.
Yeah, and it was actually pretty close. Like, he's like, oh, you don't happen to be flying from Ontario to Phoenix on whatever day. And I actually ended up flying into Ontario the night before, and then I was flying to Phoenix the next day, but like later than him or something like that. It was actually close.
It was close.
Like, it was when there's 4,000 flights a day, the odds were, that was pretty good, I thought.
It's pretty good. Yeah. And then, of course, everyone sent us a copy of that business card that our buddy Larry was handing out. Then the last thing that poured into the mailbag were the links to the new pay rates, especially at Mesa and also actually at Horizon. So don't look. Okay, I don't want you to look at the link here, okay? We're going to play a little game called Over Under. All right? I'm going to give you an over and under, and then you tell me, see if you can guess. So, first year pay on the CRJ, this is going to be the first year this contract's going to be effective, which is 9/1/22. First year pay on the CRJ, over under $145 at Mesa Airlines.
What? Under. Give me a break. First year as a captain or FO?
First year captain.
Oh, it's
145 over or under.
So first year I thought you meant FO. I was like,
which is kind of a dumb number because there might actually be first year.
I know
captains,
it's stupid, but actually no, it probably is stupid. It's street captain. You know, it's all.
Yeah, I know. I was just say it's still possible. Over under 145.
I don't even know, dude. I guess over.
You're right. It's 150.
God,
okay,
that's so crazy. What did it used to be?
68. It's literally more than doubled.
This is getting out of control. But how long are these for? 2 years? 3 years?
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean,
that's a good question.
Insane. I would love to see like the calculations where they're like, okay, guys, here's the deal. If we have this kind of attrition, it's going to cost us this much and blah, 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 blah. It's like, I'd love to see the math that was done, the spreadsheet that was created to figure this out.
To get there.
Listen, what if you're one of those folks that stuck it out at the regional? Just like, there's lots of them out there that just got a great quality of life. They live in base and just like, it's enough. Like, I'm good. And then all of a sudden you get 100% raise overnight and you're on 15th year pay.
Okay, there you go. That was the next one I was going to do. 15-year pay over under $207 an hour.
I guess over. I don't know.
It's under. It's 200.
That's insane, man. That's awesome.
And
I mean,
it was 101.
The thing is like now with this stuff, like what is going to happen with all the major airlines that are in contract negotiations? Like Alaska's already voted to strike. Like everybody's really close. Like they've been negotiating for a while. Like things are going to have to happen here. And if this all holds together, like I don't even know what's going to come down the pipe. And we're in contract negotiations. I have no idea. I can't even tell you. It's never even been brought up. We don't even know. But I know people online are like, I'm not voting yes unless it's $400 an hour. I'm like, yeah,
I know. It's interesting because, I think we've said for many years, or at least I've seen, like, it seems like the major or the legacy carrier that can essentially absorb its regional carriers to the bottom of their seniority list seems like the smartest way to go, and just like get it all back into one airline.
Well, why aren't they doing that instead of doubling the pay rates?
I know. Well, I mean, that's basically what they've done at this point. That's probably step one, is now everyone's got up at pay parity essentially.
Well,
and now,
yeah, but what about SkyWest? Like,
I would think that the smart thing to do is to acquire these guys.
I don't know that that's ever worked out all that great in history, but
I don't know what the solution is. I just don't see, like, if you're just going to pick regional pilots off from competing carriers, the solution is we'll just make it so that it's all one and then they won't leave. They're already getting paid. So what's the difference?
Yeah, but these are all temporary. I don't think the economics, like,
yeah.
How are you going to compete? Like,
they're all there, though. It's interesting. I don't know enough about regional airline contracts and how that works, but somebody's footing the bill. You max out, just because I know people are going to ask. FO starts at $100 an hour first year, and then maxes out at 110 on year 5.
Jeez. Which you'll never get to.
I wonder if there'll be a corporate guy, like especially like in Phoenix or something, that just goes to like training at Mesa. at $100 an hour, like while his airplane goes into maintenance for 3 months or something.
That's a good.
Oh, the plane's got into maintenance. Just goes, oh yeah, I'll just do new hire training at Mesa at $100 an hour. You want to pay me to go learn the CRJ in there? It'd be funny. Very healthy, $1.16 per diem per hour.
Ooh.
So, anyways, thanks to everyone that wrote into the mailbag and sent us that. Okay, on to flight advice. This comes to you presented by our friends at Harvey Watt. You probably know Harvey Watt, especially if you're a major airline pilot, because they're providing the loss of medical insurance that your union has probably negotiated for you. But guess what? The union and the company negotiate that coverage. And so the coverage at Delta could be different than the coverage at United, which could be different than the coverage at American, and so on and so forth. Not every pilot's getting the same coverage. It's important to contact Harvey Watt, figure out what you got, and see if you might need to make some type of supplemental play, especially when the money's rolling in right now. Make sure you're protected.
Or if you're a corporate pilot, renegotiating your deal.
Yes.
So for retention, I think this is always a great
This is an easy throw in. Yep.
Yeah, and it's easy, and it's really actually not that expensive.
Peace of mind. There's a calculator online. You can go in there, fill out, put your age in, and it'll even tell you what your premiums are to ensure that medical certificate.
And the other thing I always play to aircraft owners that are talking about, how do I keep my pilots around? And I always put this as a pitch because it's cost effective. The thing that it does is if you worked for somebody and they came to you and said, hey, I want you to stay around, and one of the benefits I'm going to provide to you is loss of license. Since I know that's a thing with pilots, and I think that it comes across as the owner actually caring about the pilot. And I think that goes a long way for like goodwill with some aviators in the private sector. So that's why I've always pitched that as a good thing for retention. So
Absolutely.
if you find yourself in that position, show that you care with the loss of license policy from Harvey Watt.
Go to harveywatt.com. Let's go. Okay. You know what we haven't done in a while?
What's that?
It's time for the Harvey Watt Diamond Dogs.
We do have a anonymous email Diamond Dog joining us for this one.
Anonymous to who?
Okay. The email starts off. It says, Dylan and Max, I have thoroughly enjoyed listening to y'all's podcast over the past few years. After listening to the latest episode with Jenny Showalter, I have found myself needing some flight advice. I was recently offered another job, which I intend on accepting. This new employment opportunity will not take place until the beginning of 2023 because the new employer's aircraft is still being built from the factory. Hope you got training lined up, FYI, as an aside. I am not sure how to handle the departure from my current employer. The current principal has been fantastic to me and my family, so I'd like to make my departure as smooth as possible. I spoke to my new employer about my concerns of leaving abruptly. They agreed to allow me to contract fly for my current employer until the replacement pilot is hired and returns from training. To complicate the situation, I am concerned about leaving the chief pilot. This was his first jet type rating, and it showed in school, and he hasn't improved much since then. I would not recommend them hiring a younger pilot with little to no jet experience. How do I respectfully put in my notice and state my concerns with the chief pilot without throwing anyone under the bus? I know the simple thing to do would be to put in a 2-week notice and never look back. However, I would not feel right treating these people in that manner and would hate for a worst-case scenario such as an aircraft accident to occur after my absence. Thanks, guys. And that is from H.
So how do you want to do this?
Why don't we talk first, and then we'll bring in our extra Diamond Dog for his thoughts.
Well, I'd like to put one of my quotes out there, but I don't think it's really appropriate in this. One of my things that people are famous for doing is they always start to feel bad, and you're guilty of it as in everybody else. But what do I always say?
Never feel bad for the rich guy.
Never feel bad for the rich guy. That's right. Things are not that bad. But in this case, I can understand because you don't want to read in the news and see something horrible's happen and be like, well, I didn't feel bad for it's not about that. It's about money or leaving for a better opportunity that's better for you and your family. And people have such a hard time. It's like, dude, listen, these are business people by and large. And when things go sideways for them, I bet they don't feel that bad about selling the airplane and letting you go. So it's just business at the end of the day. And we're all adults now. But in this case, he's worried about throwing somebody on the bus. But do you think that saying his concerns is throwing the other guy under the bus?
No.
I mean, you might be saving his life too. right?
Absolutely.
I mean, it's your job. That's your job. As much as while you're still being paid up to the last minute till you leave, your number one job as a corporate pilot or head of a flight department, or what comes number one over everything, is safety, right? That's how it is at every level in aviation. That's how it should be. And that's where you got to end it too, is on safety, and say, hey, look, I wouldn't feel comfortable if I were in the back or it was my family. And this is what your parting recommendation was. And if they don't listen to you and something horrible happens, it wouldn't be because you left. You said something, you brought it to their attention, and that was their choice. So
I think all of the points that you've made are spot on. Absolutely say something. Choose your words carefully how you want to do that, but certainly it needs to be said. Number two, I think you're going to be telling your chief pilot here pretty soon, I would imagine. Start having the conversations with him, planting the seed. Maybe you know somebody with experience in the airplane. Maybe there's a way that you can phrase it with him, like, hey, I'm going to be going. I really want to find someone that is real sharp in the airplane so that you won't have to be, training someone while you're trying to learn it yourself. But I think planting the seed with the chief pilot that they should be hiring somebody that with some previous experience in the airplane would be a smart way to do it. And Max is famous for this, making these people think it's their idea, but, sort of like recommending that they do that. Maybe they're going to have to pay a little more.
Well, here's the thing, too, that you have to consider. The weaker pilot that's new and everything, it's no secret to him or her.
Yeah.
That's what a lot of people fail to realize, is that they knew they struggled, didn't go by the wayside. They didn't miss it. And so most of the time, you're probably doing them a favor by not putting them, because what's worse? If you were in that position, would you rather have somebody else tell the principal that they probably need to hire someone experienced and stuff, or you being the weaker pilot have to come up and be like, look, I need you to hire somebody has more time because I'm not up to it? Like, you don't want to have that conversation. So I think in the end of the day, everybody knows, and except for the principal probably, and that's who needs to be brought into the loop. And the other pilots, I would hope, isn't offended and probably would appreciate having somebody till they get up to speed that has some more experience and is stronger.
Yeah. So a little bit of finesse, I think, here, but great learning experience, I think, for you. And to be in that situation, to talk to an aircraft owner or principal and kind of have to deliver that news, I think that'll be a good experience. I have never had to deliver that news myself, but you definitely have to think about it. I mean, there's definitely a possibility that after you told the aircraft owner that, they'd be like, all right, well, let's fire the chief pilot. I don't know if that's the case, but listen, that's out of your hands.
That's not your
Anything
decision.
beyond that. Yeah,
that's right.
Exactly. So
I've always said one of the best ways to think about decisions that you make as an aircraft manager is to always want to be in the position to be able to say, I told you so. And I'm not advocating that you always point your finger and say, I told you so, but that's kind of what I always think about in the back. I'm like, because at the end, they have to make the decisions. You're just providing the expertise to give so they can make informed decisions. So
yeah, absolutely. Okay.
What did our Diamond Dog?
Yeah, our emailer Diamond Dog wrote in. He said, here's the best quote. Pilots need to stop feeling guilty about pursuing the best career path for themselves and their families. So,
period. Let's put that on a sticker.
We don't need the guilt trip mentality that have been ingrained into pilots after decades of pilot surpluses and job shortages. And the idea of pilots valuing themselves and their skill set should continue regardless of the current conditions going forward. He goes on to say, everyone is always so concerned about whether or not their employer is going to be upset with them, but that they don't realize how their employer reacts to them. I think his point is, listen, if you gave 2 weeks or 4 weeks, they're going to be mad either way. So,
well, but not feeling bad for the rich guy and all of that, that doesn't mean you can't leave him in a lurch. Like, I think it shows a lot of integrity too. If you set things up so there's no disruption in service and everything else, and you do it with that attitude, which involves a lot of times a lot more than 2 weeks, right?
Absolutely. It does. And I can tell you the jobs that I've left, I've always given maximum notice, and it's worked out for me to do that.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people are really afraid of them. People will be like, oh, you know what? Well, then just leave, just quit. You're fired. Well, I've never heard of that happening.
Especially, yeah.
But the thing is, you have to realize too, people, they might be pissed or upset or whatever.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, they still need you to fly them around. Otherwise, that's their main motivation at the end of the day.
Especially if you're on like a 2-pilot, 1 airplane type setup.
Yeah, totally.
If you're at a big Fortune 500 company, that's when I've heard of like, okay.
But that's where these situations always arise because people get very close with the owner, which I'm 100% guilty of. I've been very close with every person I've flown with. And if you're going to foster that sort of relationship, there's additional facets to managing that relationship. And the departures is one of the hardest parts. But I remember when I quit my last job, it was great. He trying to offer me a bunch of money, and I said, what got it across to him? I said, listen, if this was about money, I would have called you up and we would have had a lunch or a drink, and I would have just told you where I was at. I'm like, it's not about money. And, I kind of went through the other reasons, and I'm like, what I need is not realistic to ask you to give me in this situation. So I have to leave. That's how this is. And then he was like, all right, I'm not happy about it, but I get it.
I want Mexican food. I'm at an Italian restaurant. There's nothing you can do. I have to leave. Our emailer does go on to give a little bit more advice here. He says, referencing the other pilot, you do have an obligation to tell whoever you need to about your concerns with the other pilot. Again, be polite, be respectful. You can even make it a point to talk about all of the other good qualities of the other pilot, but you do need to make your concerns known. Once you have made those concerns known, that's all you can do. The principal, owner, operator are professionals and adults. The impetus is on them to follow through with your recommendations. So I think he pretty much agrees with us. But it's a good conversation to have. I think a lot of guys and girls are leaving jobs right now. And certainly, there could be situations where there's a weaker pilot.
But don't feel guilty. These are first world problems these people are having.
Absolutely.
Losing their PJ pilot.
Speak your piece and move on. That was a great email, I'd say. Because it wasn't just, should I take this job? Do I need to commute? Blah, blah, blah. There was actually a little different angle.
Yeah, the only thing we charge for all this great advice is the follow-up email. You just follow up with us. And after you quit, let us know how it went. Because it's just not fair to leave us hanging like this. Get us vested and involved in your story, and then we never know what happens.
Never know what happens. Yeah, that's right.
I got to sleep too.
That's right. Thanks to Harvey Watt for presenting flight advice for the episode. If you need some flight advice, you can shoot us some email, info@215podcast.com, or visit the website and fill out the anonymous flight advice form. We don't even need to know your name. We'll be happy to assemble the Diamond Dogs and tackle your issue. Yeah. That being said, Max, we're about to embark on another installment of What's It Like to Be a Pilot? ... And this one is for the Coast Guard, the fixed wing.
Coasties.
Yeah. Ron wrote in and he said, hey, I fly on the fixed wing side at the Coast Guard if you guys are interested. And we said, heck yeah, because I didn't even know the Coast Guard really had any fixed wing airplanes. So I think you guys are really going to enjoy this interview, hearing about that side of aviation, what they do, and the opportunities that are out there for people just getting started in aviation, the types of programs that you could do right out of school, get involved with the Coast Guard and transition to the airline. So,
did you really not know the Coast Guard had fixed wing airplanes?
I mean, I knew they did, but not a ton. Like I grew up on the Oregon coast, and I say this in this show, but it's all helicopter.
Know?
Like you never see them.
That's because it was always foggy and cloudy and raining.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why.
Yeah,
you heard
you
them
just
though.
Hear
I'm sure.
I heard the helicopter. Yeah, you'll hear in the interview that the fixed wing bases, there's not a ton of them. It's different.
But you never saw those pictures of they had like Falcon jets and all kinds of stuff flying like super low over the water.
That in like 1995.
The airplane you fly looks like a Coast Guard fixed wing airplane.
That's true.
Didn't know?
That's true. But I'm talking about when I was a kid, not now.
Oh, all right.
Like when I lived there.
All right, whatever. Let's get to it.
Here we go. Let's get to Ron. Max, we're ready for another installment in our What's It Like to Be a Pilot series. We're so excited to have Commander Ron Bledsoe from the U.S. Coast Guard joining us today to tell us a little bit about what it's like to be a pilot for the Coast Guard.
Welcome to the show, Ron.
Thanks, Dylan, Max, for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, Ron, you reached out to us recently and you said, hey, I'm a Coast Guard pilot, fixed wing Coast Guard pilot. And you were very generous to offer to share a little bit about what that is like for our listeners. I grew up on the Oregon coast and I saw the Coast Guard helicopters fly by pretty much every single day. And I think I'm going to probably screw this up. I think it's the Dolphin. I think it's probably what they fly up there.
Most likely, yeah.
And so it was always a fascinating thing for me. As long as I've grown up, I've seen them fly, but I never really saw any fixed wing Coast Guard airplanes fly. But we'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your background. How did you start flying in the Coast Guard? Fixed wing versus roto? Like, how did that all work? So give us a little background about yourself and how you got to where you're at.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. So I graduated high school in 1999. Went to the Coast Guard Academy out of high school. So the Coast Guard Academy is in New London, Connecticut. A lot of people don't know that. It is just like any of the other service academies. So West Point, Naval Academy, Air Force Academy, or Kings Point. So 4 years there, came out with my bachelor's degree. And when we graduated at the time, everybody had to serve aboard and then you could apply for flight school. That's changed since I graduated. Literally the year after, you could go right to flight school. So kudos to those guys and gals that got to go right to flight school, but I had to do some time on ships and it was fun and got to experience a lot of cool things there and applied for flight school out of my ship tours. I was stationed down in Florida, so that wasn't too bad being a Florida guy myself. So I worked out in the Caribbean and Central and South America and then got picked up for flight school. So we attend naval flight training with the Navy Marine Corps in Pensacola. So we get our wings of gold there out of Corpus Christi if you go fixed wing. And if you stay rotary wing, you just complete all of your training there in Pensacola. As you kind of mentioned, most of our pilots are all rotary wing. So either flying the MH-65 Dolphin or the MH-60 Jayhawk. And then we have a small group of folks that are flying fixed wing for the Coast Guard.
So you started flying helicopters or did you go right to fixed wing?
No, I was like to say in the military, selected and directed for fixed wing. So as my Hilo brothers and sisters give me a hard time, I initially was trying to go rotary wing, as most young 26-year-old pilots are trying to do. But at the time, there's a shortage of fixed wing pilots. So a lot of us in flight school were selected and directed by the Coast Guard to go to a multi-engine fixed wing training down at the Naval Air Station in Corpus Christi. So about halfway through flight school, you finish the primary section and then moved down to Corpus Christi and finished up my training down there in Corpus.
Cool.
And one other question for you too, Ron. When you signed up to go to the Coast Guard, did you have dreams of being a pilot then?
Yes, that was the path, right? But just kind of service academy stuff, serving aboard ships is pretty tough. So I just kind of took one assignment as it came ahead of me. So when you graduate a service academy, you have to serve 5 years, and then you can, leave any service you'd like, or you can continue on. So I said, well, if I make it to the 5-year mark and I haven't got picked up for flight school, maybe Coast Guard aviation isn't for me. But luckily I got picked up for flight school at about like the 3-year mark. And then, went to Pensacola in 2006 and graduated Corpus Christi in 2008. And my first flying assignment was back in Miami, Florida.
Okay. Give us a little rundown here. I know nothing about the fixed wing side.
Okay.
So what did you learn to fly in, like a King Air type airplane?
Right. Yeah. So when I was in primary flight training, it was a T-34 Charlie at the time. Now I think they're flying the T-6. So I was flying the T-44 Alpha in Corpus Christi. So that was the multi-engine trainer there. A model. So it was all analog steam gauges. Now I think they're flying the T-44 Charlie, which is GPS and stuff like that. So it was there. Most of my class was actually at the time Air Force. I think the Air Force isn't doing a lot of training with the Navy anymore. But at the time, most of my class was all going C-130s for the Air Force. A couple Navy folks, a couple Marine Corps folks, and a couple Coast Guard folks. So it was a really fun training group of people because 4 different services all learning to fly fixed wing for the Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force, and Coast Guard. So I got picked up out of there and got assigned to Miami, Florida. So moved from Texas back to Miami, which is kind of funny because I literally just come from there before I got picked up for flight school. So moved back to the same base I just come from on the ship side, now in the aviation.
But you're back with wings.
I know, exactly, right? So I was in a different building, flying in different things. So at the time, I was flying the HU-25 Falcon. It was a derivative of the Falcon 20 jet.
Oh.
So Falcon had made modifications. It was the late 70s, I think, that came online in the Coast Guard. And so they made the first set of windows were expanded. So they were observer windows, so real big windows there. So our crew could look out for people in the water, vessels. And they also cut a hole in the floor so we could drop dewatering pumps and life rafts out of the floor of the Falcon 20 jet, which is pretty cool. They had like a rail that went down the cabin. And so we'd bring this equipment down the rail and we'd get over the target and literally they would throw the pump or the raft out of a hole in the floor. It was pretty wild. So
whose job is that?
They call it a drop master. So the drop master is in charge of rigging up the pumps and the life rafts and the parachutes. And depending on how heavy the item weighs is how big of a parachute it has to have. So that's a pretty sweet job.
And then what do they strap like flotation devices to the pump so it doesn't just sink?
Right. So it has a parachute and that has like a sea anchor so it doesn't like drift away. And the goal is to put the trail line over the vessel that you're trying to drop the pump or the raft to so that people on the boat can like haul it in on the line and it's naturally buoyant in the container that we throw it out the plane.
So how does the dude know when to drop it? Is the pilot telling him when to drop it?
Yeah, so it's more of an art than a science. Every sea state's different, every wind condition's different. You try to drop it into the wind so the parachute inflates fully, and you try to drop that trail line right over the vessel So it's easier for them to haul that line in, to bring the pump or bring the raft on board. Or if it's people in the water, you try to drop the raft as close to the people, obviously without hitting them, as possible.
And this is like 500 feet above the water?
200 feet, yep. They have a line cutter that's armed. So they have it based on the timing of how many seconds it takes from 200 feet to hit the water at the prescribed speed. And it separates. So obviously it doesn't sink with that big parachute. And then they can haul in that line to hopefully bring that raft or the dewatering pump on board to help stop flooding or whatever casualty they have on board.
Wait, did you say there's a line cutter?
Yep.
So the line is like spooling out from the airplane and then something cuts it away?
Yeah, little charge. Yeah.
I like how Ron talks about this like we're idiots. Like, this is so normal.
Of course.
Come on. Of course there's a line cutter, you morons.
Yeah, so otherwise the parachute would sink everything in the ocean.
All I could think of is like the flour bombing, you do from small airplanes to try and hit stuff where you drop the sack of flour and nobody hits anything.
But, wow.
Yeah.
So is the HU-20 kind of the typical first aircraft that most fixed-wing pilots are going to get assigned?
So really back then, we just had the HU-25 Falcon and the C-130H model.
Okay.
And now, as the HU-25 Falcon's been retired, that was retired in about 2014 totally in the Coast Guard. That was replaced by the HC-144 Ocean Sentry. That's built by Airbus Defense. That replaced the HU-25 Falcon. The Falcon jet was really fun to fly. But as a turbofan aircraft, 1,000 feet over the water, it burned a lot of fuel. So we went back to a twin-engine turboprop with the HC-144.
Oh, I'm just Googling this right now. For our listeners, it sort of looks like an ATR.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does sort of look like an ATR.
Yeah.
And then the C-27 kind of looks like a two-engine C-130 sort of.
Yeah, that's what I'm currently flying now. Yep. So we have the C-130J model, the C-130H model, the C-27, and the HC-144 are our fixed-wing fleet of maritime patrol aircraft. The C-130H is slowly getting retired. I think the Air Force has mostly retired their H models. We've mostly retired our H models as well. And we have the C-27 and our HC-144. They make up our medium-range surveillance fleet, and the C-130s are our long-range surveillance fleet.
So what's the primary purpose of the fixed-wing fleet? Is it search and rescue or surveillance, trying to catch people with drugs and sneak into the country, or what?
Yeah, I'd say mostly law enforcement. So is the name of the program. So law enforcement, fisheries enforcement. We can also do cargo with the ramp on the back. So different planes can obviously hold different amounts of cargo. So a lot of times we'll support whether it's hurricane relief or moving helicopter support equipment kits to support shipboard deployments, or we can move parts or people or anything like that in the back of the airplane. The C-130s can move vehicles because they're much larger, but primarily we're maritime patrol aircraft. So our main game is to patrol the high seas for counter-narcotics, fisheries enforcement, and stuff like that.
So how far from the coast do you generally go in those airplanes?
I guess it depends, right? Depends how much fuel you have on board, how much cargo you have to take. It depends where the mission is. So obviously our C-130s are long range. They have the longest legs of our fleet, and then have a little bit shorter range. So I think that the longest case that we worked off the California coast is about 800 miles offshore with the C-27.
Wow.
And C-144 has a little bit shorter range of that. And obviously a C-130 has a longest leg. C-130J can make it from California to Hawaii, no problem. Or on the East Coast out to a case off Bermuda or something like that, but with no problem.
Interesting. It's funny you think about people that are in the different branches of the armed forces. A lot of your job, I imagine, is predicated on the weather, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Like the weather is almost your adversary in a way, or your enemy in some respects. Is that accurate?
Yeah, a lot of times when bad weather is coming, like a huge storm or something like that, they'll move the aircraft inland or try to get to a spot that shouldn't be affected by the storm. And then usually we'll come in behind the storm and try to do reconnaissance and survey the ports and check on vessels and possibly in distress.
Interesting.
So we are not the hurricane hunters. We are not the Air Force C-130s out of Keesler Air Force Base. We are not the NOAA out of Tampa. We do not punch into the storm to do reconnaissance like our other brothers and sisters do in NOAA and the hurricane hunters and stuff like that.
Right. You're providing all the services to everyone affected by the storm, which is even more important.
This is true. Yeah. So trying to get the ports back open, to get commerce going, to get oil and gas back into the ports and cargo, and obviously make sure that we can commence the trade again and make sure the vessels are safe to go back into those ports is a big deal, as long as obviously, looking for vessels in distress and stuff like that.
Right. So just going from what I know, the known to the unknown, from a fixed wing perspective, let's say go back to your Falcon 20 days or your HU-25, I guess. Talk us through what a regular day looks like for you. Are you doing regular patrols up and down the coast? Or are you waiting for the phone to ring?
Yeah. So typically we come in the afternoon. Different air stations have a report in different time, but we typically run like a 24-hour shift. So, and then, usually get up at normal time. in the morning, and then, we're on call. So if something goes off and we have a plane out on the line, so if that alarm goes off at, 2 in the morning, then we're wheels up in 30 minutes.
And how long is the shift?
24 hours. Typically, most of the search and rescue and stuff usually occurs in the evening. So most of our air stations bring in the crews usually about the afternoon, say, 3 or 4 o'clock. So I try to work with your, circadian rhythm. Usually try to take a nap before I come to work, just so if we do get that call, in the middle of the night, I haven't been bothered, and make sure we're not out mowing the lawn in 100-degree heat and stuff like that, and try to be in crew S as much as possible before coming on shift at about 1,500 or 1,600.
And how many days a week?
Typically, you're running like a 24-hour shift about once a week, but you're probably also doing a training flight or a patrol throughout the week as well.
Oh, interesting. So a patrol is like a scheduled separate from your on-call shift.
Exactly. Yep. So typically we'll run like a fisheries patrol or law enforcement patrol once a day. Plus we have our alert crew back at base. So it's a little bit of like being a police officer on the beat, but also being a firefighter, right? So if you're going out, say on Friday, I was doing a fisheries enforcement patrol off the Oregon and Washington coast. We were out there making sure there was no fishing vessels in the regulated and enclosed areas, that they weren't fishing in the areas that they shouldn't be. But on patrol, there was a vessel's emergency position indicating radio beacon was going off. So we have this EPIRB going off 150 miles offshore, and we can hear the onshore guys hailing out to this boat and hailing, but it's only one-way communication. So we call back to the guys on shore. We said, hey, where's this vessel? They give us the position. It's 150 miles offshore. So talk to Seattle Center, climb up to altitude, go check out this boat. He's fine. His just beacon's going off for some reason. So some technical glitch there. So he's fine. We get his serial number, we get his name. He is not in distress. And then we pass that back to the guys on shore. Then case closed, he's okay. But that was a routine fisheries patrol that could have been a fishing vessel 150 miles offshore that was taking on water. But luckily he was okay.
So do you have like pumps and life rafts and stuff already aboard all the time? Like in the event that guy was sinking and you needed to get him some stuff out the hole in the bottom of the airplane?
Right. Yep. So our crews that are on patrol can also respond to search and rescue at any time. So we have the life rafts, we have the dewatering pump. We have the data marker buoys. We have smoke flares that we can locate vessels. We can identify vessels if the helicopter's coming in and they can't see them due to the fog, and we can see them. We can put down a smoke that can burn for 40 to 60 minutes, and we can keep laying those out to help vector in vessels or helicopters. So yeah, any of our aircraft that are going on patrol, whether it's law enforcement or fisheries enforcement, they also have all that search and rescue equipment just in case something comes up while they're out there.
So have you ever had to respond to an airplane that went down in the water?
Me personally, I've not had to respond to an airplane in the water, but I know that we did have a crew when I was stationed in Miami. I wasn't flying, but they were going down to Puerto Rico, I think on a cargo mission, actually. And it's the Cirrus, right, that has the parachute in the back. Yeah, Cirrus went down off the Bahamas, and they were able to locate the vessel and bring in the PAMI and I think Royal Defense Force came in and picked the guy up out of the water. But we were able to respond to that because his ELT went off. So, ships have ELTs, airplanes have ELTs. So his ELT went off, and luckily I think it was 2 people on board. They both survived. So,
and speaking of Puerto Rico, like that whole corridor, let's call it, from Miami to Puerto Rico there's all these weird jurisdictions. How does that work? Does Coast Guard get with all the different countries, and how does that all work in the Caribbean?
Yeah, so we have a lot of bilateral agreements, is what they're called, with the countries down in the Caribbean. So we're able to work with their countries and their defense forces and their coast guards and their navies to help stop human trafficking and narcotics trade and stuff like that. So a lot of times we'll have shipwriters on our ships and patrol boats down there. We'll also take some of their law enforcement officials flying on our helicopters and on our fixed-wing aircraft. So there's a lot of partnerships down there in the Caribbean for these smaller countries like the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos. But we have a great working relationship with all those countries in the Caribbean and in Central America.
One of the things that I've always wondered, like this is the thought that's gone through my head when I'm flying to Hawaii a lot of times, and then look on the iPad or wherever, and you're like, God, you're like out here in the middle of nowhere. And so what would happen if you had to ditch in the middle? Is that even something the Coast Guard would respond to, or is there like a limit? And if so, if that's in the wheelhouse, like you're way too far out for a helicopter. So like, how does that go down?
So obviously outside the range of a helicopter, any of those Mayday calls, they're going to go through really 2 different organizations, right? They're going to go through the International Maritime Organization. So IMO deals with all the ships. And then you have ICAO, right? So the aviation authorities. So if it's an aircraft that goes down or a ship that goes down, somehow that message is going to get to one of the worldwide rescue coordination centers. So they're throughout the world. There's a great search and rescue international organization that coordinates all that. So for the Coast Guard, they're broken down to our different districts. If something happens off the west coast of the United States, it'll either come through our command center in Alameda, which is our District 11 Command Center, the Joint Rescue Coordination Center. If it's off Washington or Oregon, that'll go through Seattle. That's our District 13. They're the Joint Rescue Coordination Center for the Pacific Northwest. Then you have Honolulu and Juneau, Alaska, knock out Alaska and Hawaii. But if it could be off Guam as a U.S. territory, that falls under the Honolulu district. They would deploy a C-130, J out of Air Station Barbers Point to go respond to something way out there. And that search and rescue case could last days or, a week if it's that far out. We can also reach out to our, DoD partners. The Air Force and the California Air Guard have pararescue folks out of Moffett Airfield in the Bay Area. They can respond to search and rescue cases. We'll also make a broadcast to any vessels in the vicinity. Mm-hmm. So just maybe a merchant ship that's out there. And mariners look out for mariners. So we can put a broadcast up to them. They all have satellite capability. So we can send a message to any vessel in the area. Say, hey, a certain type of aircraft went down with 10 people on board. And if we know that position and we know the position of the vessel, we can actually call them directly and say, hey, we need you to head to this position. We have a downed aircraft until a Coast Guard or military asset can get out there and help them out.
Have you ever showed up to a ship in distress way out there? And it's got to be weird in a fixed wing airplane because you could see somebody in distress down there and there's only so much you can do, right? You could drop a raft, you can drop a pump, but have you had like that helpless feeling in a way, or you're like, oh man, I'm so close to you. I could see you. Can you describe what that's like?
Sure. Yeah. We had a case a couple Sundays ago. We were out on a law enforcement patrol and we got word that a sailing vessel was on their way to Hawaii. It was a single gentleman, 50-year-old, and the weather was turning pretty bad. And one of his sails blew out and he was able to send a message to his brother and said, I think this is a bad idea. I shouldn't have done this by myself. I need to declare an emergency. I think it was using one of the satellite devices, like a spot device or something like that. Relay the message to his brother. His brother called the Coast Guard. And then we got dispatched. So it was about 100 miles off the coast of Santa Barbara. So we went out there and the ceilings were about 300 feet, which is pretty challenging because our drop altitude for our equipment is about 200 feet. So we got launched out there pretty far offshore. So they launched a helicopter out of San Diego. So we trucked out off Santa Barbara to go find the vessel. We had a pretty good position, but like I said, ceilings were 300 feet broken. And I got out there, found the vessel. He launched a flare at us. So we were able to identify him and we marked his position and made radio contact with him and said, hey, there's a helicopter on their way, but it's going to be, about 90 minutes from once we got out there. And we just kept overflying him. And kept talking to him every about 10 or 15 minutes and know that, hey, we see you. We're going to keep an eye on you. I said, if your ship sinks, we can drop you a raft. But we knew the helicopter was on their way. They had a rescue swimmer on board. So we're just trying to keep his spirits up, keep his morale up and say, hey, help's on the way. We have a hoist brief that we can give him ahead of time so he knows what to expect. So when we knew the helicopter was about 20 minutes away, we gave him that brief over the radio so he knew what to expect. So when a MH-60 comes overhead, it's like a hurricane over your boat. So it's very loud. I'm sure he's very nervous. So we gave him the whole brief. And when the helicopter was ready, they had him go into the water. The rescue swimmer was deployed into the water and they put him in the basket and hoisted him up. And then we escorted the helicopter back into Santa Barbara because they were so far offshore. They requested an escort just in case anything happened to their crew. They had somebody out there keeping an eye on them. So we escorted him into Santa Barbara, both landed there in Santa Barbara, and he was able to get picked up out of there.
Hold on. Were you flying below the clouds this whole time at 200 feet, just zigzagging over this dude?
Yep, just in like a racetrack pattern at 200 feet. Yep.
That's kind of fun.
Your reactions. It's the best part of the story.
I want to know, while you're killing time and giving this guy this briefing, did you also be like, dude, can you kind of help us understand why you think you by yourself just going to jump in a sailboat and sail to Hawaii by yourself? Like, can you run me through that decision?
It was kind of funny because I talked to him afterward. He got the Santa Barbara FBO there. And I said, hey, how are you doing? And he was really shooken up and obviously pretty cold and wet. He didn't have a survival suit on. He just had rain gear. So like rain jacket, rain pants, and he had just jumped in the Pacific. So he was pretty cold and we got him some towels and got him all warmed up and some coffee and stuff like that. But he's like, yeah, I learned a lot already from this trip. And he had been only gone like 2 days. So he learned a lot from that. And luckily he was able to get picked up and saved.
So what happens to the boat now?
And that's a great question, Max. My job was to find him and pick him up or have the helicopter, pick him up. But then obviously he has to arrange for his own, salvage for somebody to go out there and pick up his vessel and tow it back in.
So what if you get there and it's the dude by himself, but then all of a sudden you see his golden retriever pop out from below? Are you guys going to save the golden retriever too?
I would defer that to my helicopter brothers and sisters on that one. So like as Dylan said, there's not much I can do from a fixed wing aircraft.
Well, I know, but I mean like the Coast Guard as a whole. Do you think that that's something that they would do?
Yeah, I think we've rescued a lot of animals for the good of the morale, and it's the right thing to do. But yeah, like I said, I have 0 hours in a helicopter. So I know a lot of helicopters that they have the room and the capacity that obviously they'll pick up someone's, dog or something like that.
Man. Oh, that's cool. You're going to be out there in comfort. You can do this. You're like a little coach out there. It's nice. I'm sure the helicopter will be here in just a few minutes.
I know my helicopter friends are going to give me such a hard time for this, but yeah, they call us like the third base coach of search and rescue. It's like you're out there, like you said, just cheering them on. But yeah, and like the best we can do is drop a pump or a raft.
Yeah,
so
could you drop a Coors Light maybe?
Yeah. Do you have any whiskey up there?
Oh man, I just talked to the helicopter. He's going to be here in 5 minutes. Oh man.
The good news is if you sink though, we can throw you a raft.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Hopefully we won't hit you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's take a quick break to talk about you wanting to set out in a sailboat solo. What if you had a life insurance policy? What would your spouse do with that payout? Hopefully they'd call our friend and certified financial planner, Tim Pope, because that could potentially be a lot of money, and maybe Ron B's not going to be out there to rescue you. So could be a potential windfall coming. Whatever the case may be, Tim Pope is available to assist with widows of sailboat captains, professional pilots. He's out there. He's ready. Timothy P. Pope, your financial planning partner for all phases of your financial flight or sailboat journey. Check the show notes for a link to book your free appointment with Tim. All right, back to the show.
So how much of your job involves drug interdiction and people that are trying to penetrate the coastline with nefarious purposes?
Yeah, I'd say a majority of what we do, human trafficking is pretty saddening that people are trying to do that. So obviously our area responsibility goes all the way from San Diego all the way up to Port Angeles, Washington. So we do a lot of patrols off the Southern California coast, and we work hand in hand with the Customs and Border Protection down there as both agencies of Department of Homeland Security. So we've a great partnership with our brother agency down there with CBP. And then obviously we deploy to off the Central and South America, trying to stop narcotics traffic coming up from South America.
One of our friends, she was on, was it a cutter, Max? I think out of Astoria in Oregon. And she's from Oregon and said, I am too. And so I think she got on the cutter and thought, this is great. I'm going to be cruising around Oregon. And then she's like, I'm in South America more than I'm in Oregon. So I was surprised to hear.
No, that's true. Yeah. So a lot of times our ships will take the embarked helicopter on board to do the counter narcotics mission. And as a maritime patrol aircraft, we'll work hand in hand with the cutter, or whether it be a U.S. Navy ship or a host nation ship that's out there also on patrol. And we'll coordinate our patrols with them and to try to stop the narcotics trafficking.
Interesting. Let's talk a little bit more from the career angle, and then we'll get back. And I know you're going to have some great stories for us, so we'll get some more of that. But let's say I'm a kid in high school and listening to the show. I'm going, oh, this sounds pretty cool. Like I can still serve my country, maybe in a little bit different way. And you can actually designate that a career path as a pilot now. Can you talk a little bit about, if you're a young aviator and you say, this sounds like something I want to do, what that would look like?
Yeah. So the Coast Guard, we have a couple different commissioning routes. All of our pilots are commissioned officers. So you can take the route that I did. I went to the Coast Guard Academy. You apply there. It's 4-year school in New London, Connecticut, just like any of the other service academies. It doesn't require a congressional appointment. I guess that's the biggest difference. So you don't have to get your congressman or senator to give you an appointment there. It's purely based on merit. So it's a 4-year school. You can graduate with a Bachelor of Science in one of the degrees there. And as you kind of finish up your senior year there, they call it a dream sheet. You put, hey, I want to either, serve aboard ship or serve aviation or work in our prevention fields with the maritime industry, any of those career fields. So if you get selected for flight training, you would report down into Pensacola and attend flight training. We have Coast Guard instructors down there. You're a Coast Guard student, but you kind of fall under the umbrella of the Navy. And flight school is about 2 years from checking in to graduating, and you get your wings of gold. Like I said, also in the middle of flight school, you put in another dream sheet for rotary wing or fixed wing, depending on what you want to do. And it's always like based on the needs of the service. So at the year I was going through, we were short on fixed wing pilots. So top few folks got picked up for rotary wing, and a lot of other of us were selected and directed for fixed wing. But I've had a great career and really enjoyed it. So it's kind of funny how everything sort of happens like that. So the Coast Guard Academy is one commissioning source, like I did. We also have this program called the College Student Pre-Commissioning Initiative. It's called C-SPY. You're a sophomore or junior in college. You get picked up for C-SPY. You're actually in the Coast Guard, and they're paying for your college. And after you finish the C-SPY program, you go to officer candidate school. So officer candidate school is about 17 weeks. It happens to also be on the same grounds as the Coast Guard Academy. Most of our officer leadership schools are there on the grounds of the Coast Guard Academy. You would do a C-SPY and then you'd apply for flight school. So that's typically if you kind of go to like a normal 4-year degree, normal 4-year school. And then within C-SPY, this is a newer program, you can get guaranteed flight school, which is pretty cool. So you could go right from officer candidate school and have guaranteed flight school. Like you can have guaranteed flight school right out of the Coast Guard Academy, but you can also serve aboard a ship and then apply for flight school like I did. So you have like several opportunities. And I think they have like 3 or 4 panels every year to get into flight school for the Coast Guard. So lots of opportunity. So you can do some time on ships and then apply to flight school out of there.
And let's say I already have my private pilot's license or I have some relevant flying experience. Is that going to give me a leg up, or is it more like merit-based and other performance stuff?
No, I think that would give you a leg up. I was fortunate enough to sit on one of those flight school panels for officer candidate school. And so we were interviewing all these panels. And yeah, if we had a candidate that already had the private pilot's license, or maybe they'd been a CFI or something like that, because we're trying to predict will this person, graduate flight school. It's several millions of dollars to put somebody through flight school for 2 years. So if I knew someone already had a private pilot's license, I think that would give them a leg up on the competition.
And let's say you're successful, you do get that flight slot, you make it through training. What's the commitment like once you get do they base it on, okay, you get your wings, now you've got to serve for this long, or talk to us a little about the commitments?
That's a great question. Yeah. So the officer candidate school payback just for officer candidate school is 3 years. The Coast Guard Academy is 5 years. And then if you get picked up for flight school, that's another 8-year commitment. So if you're an academy grad, you're already invested for 13 years before you're, free of your obligations. And officer candidate would be 11 years if you did the 3 years and then plus the 8 years of the flight school payback.
And then one other question I had, with the airlines being so tempting now these days with big money and everything else, I imagine just like every other branch of the military, folks are switching careers at some point when they satisfy their commitment. Is there any way to stay in and still fly for the Coast Guard? Do you guys have a reserve system or anything, or is there any way to do that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dylan. Yeah, we just started that literally this summer. It had been previously around many years ago before I got into the Coast Guard, but they revitalized that. So we have reserve aviators now. So you have to have already paid back your 8 years of flight school and already be an aircraft commander or piloting in a certain type of aircraft so that you're able to be a reserve pilot. And so we have a couple pilots out there starting this year. I think we have like about 12 positions we're starting out this year. A lot of them are going to be integrated with the Navy and flight training because the Navy already had reserve instructors. So that'll be hopefully a seamless transition there at Pensacola or Corpus Christi. And then we're also going to try it out in some of our fleet units for reserve helicopter and fixed wing pilots.
Oh, that's really cool. And last question about kind of the career. Let's say pay rates. Obviously, I don't have a lot of military knowledge, but it's tied to your rank and your pay grades and stuff like that. Would you say Coast Guard is very similar to other branches? Is it all the same? Is that a dumb question? Can you talk a little bit about like the comp structure?
Not a dumb question at all. Yeah. So the military pay scales across the board are the same, right? So if you're you're 03 in the Marine Corps, that would be a captain. You'd be a lieutenant in the Coast Guard. And at say 7 years, you'd have the same pay. Called something different, but you're an 03 in the Marine Corps or Air Force or Army would be a captain. And then the Navy Marine Corps, you'd be a lieutenant, but same pay scales. So yeah, you could Google military pay scales and it'll tell you years of service and your rank and boom, that's how much you make per month.
Say you're nearing the end of your 10 or 13 year commitment in there. What kind of money would you expect to make? Because I know there's your monthly pay and then there's like other pay if you're deployed and like all this other stuff. So just, ballpark.
So you have your, basic pay, which everybody, in the military gets. Then there's usually special pay. And the Coast Guard, the guys that drive the ships and gals, they get sea pay. Aviators get flight pay. Obviously, other specialties and other services get different types of pay depending on what they're doing. We also get housing allowance depending on where you're stationed, and usually get like a little subsistence allowance for food and stuff like that, depending on where you're living. If there's access to military commissaries and stuff like that. Obviously, we have healthcare. There's a little bit of pay involved in that. Our pay stub is a couple different lines. It's not just like, one pay.
No, I know it's complicated.
Yeah.
So, but at the end of the day, if you've been there for like 10 or 12 years, are you making like $10,000 a month, $12,000, $15,000? Like, I just have no idea. I honestly,
Yeah, ballpark, depending on years of service, probably making about $8,000 a month. We always say, some guys and gals put, their housing allowance in that number, some don't. The nice thing about allowances, they're not taxable. So obviously someone that lives in San Francisco gets a lot more housing allowance than someone that lives in, say, maybe Texas, or maybe not anymore with the housing stuff, but typically, Boston, New York, San Francisco, those are big housing allowance areas. But if someone lives, say, in the Midwest, maybe housing isn't as much. So obviously you're not getting as much for housing allowance, but obviously your cost of living should be a little lower in theory.
I imagine there's a lot of folks, aircraft commanders and folks that are in a position similar to yours where if they go and look online, it's very easy to see what you're going to make at the airline or the pay rate or whatever. But as you mentioned, there's a lot of other benefits. So calculating like, well, I'm going to make, $105,000 flying for the Coast Guard, but I'm going to make, more doing something else. It's a tough balancing act, especially if you like your job, where that's got to be tricky for service men and women right now to kind of figure out, because I know that allure of the money at the airline can seem really appealing.
Well, then that plus you're looking at retirement at the airline versus that you're going to get a pension if you retire from the military, which has value also. So,
yeah.
And everyone has different life circumstances, married or not, children or not, where you want to live. If you're stationed at a place that you really love, maybe you ask for an extension. There's lots of options. Or maybe you don't really care about the aircraft you're flying. Or we also bring in a lot of people from other services. They're called direct commission aviators. We have a lot of Army, Marine Corps, Navy, Air Force experience that comes into the Coast Guard. So we get a lot of servicemen and women from other services, which is really fun to fly with folks that have flown Blackhawks and F-18 Hornets. And this brings a different amount of experience to the Coast Guard aviation fleet. But yeah, at this decision gate, the 11-year mark or 13-year mark, you have to say, hey, do I want to keep doing this? Or so the Coast Guard and with all the other DoD services have been offering a lot of retention bonuses to try to keep that talent. Obviously, it's cheaper to keep the talent than to bring in someone and send somebody through flight school and they graduate with, say, 200 hours. Well, if I can keep somebody that has 2,000 hours with that experience, that's an aircraft commander or an instructor pilot or a flight examiner, really want to try to hold on to those people if I can.
I've always thought it's funny how the government can take a pilot from zero to hero in, a couple hundred hours, but it costs $2 million. Or you could go to all ATPs for $150,000. And we're flying around turbine, single engine turboprops and like all this stuff. It's like, dude, haven't we figured this out yet? Especially for like big fixed wing jets and stuff. It's like, if you're going to go fly a KC-135, let's just get an ab initio program going here.
Something. So one other question I probably should have asked a little earlier. If you're considering going to work for the Coast Guard, obviously the key word in that is coast. What are the hub cities, the domicile cities?
Yeah, I guess it depends if you're talking aviation, like air stations, or you're talking like, air stations. Yeah, because obviously small boat stations, being from Oregon, Dylan, I'm sure there's several small boat stations up and down the Oregon
Shout
coast.
Out to like, Depot Bay, Newport.
And me being a Florida guy, every 3 exits on I-95, there's probably a Coast Guard small boat station.
Yeah, no, I should say.
Yeah, so on the air stations, so typically, obviously we have more helicopters in the Coast Guard inventory than fixed wing. So usually the bases with fixed wing and rotary wing are the larger cities. So you're Miami, Elizabeth City, North Carolina, Clearwater, Florida, Cape Cod, Corpus Christi, Texas, Mobile, Alabama, Sacramento, Kodiak, Honolulu. Those are that have fixed wing and rotary wing.
None like San Diego for fixed wing or anything like that?
Not for fixed wing. Back in the day, they used to have Falcons in San Diego and Falcons in Astoria. But I think that was in the late 90s, they consolidated and they just had C-130s here in Sacramento. And then we transitioned to the C-27J in about 2016.
So those are all out of Sacramento?
So yeah, we're here in Sacramento, Max. Yeah, at the old McClellan Air Force Base. It's called McClellan Park now. It's just us and CAL FIRE and FBO and some flight schools and stuff like that. So
interesting. All right. Last question on the service stuff. Where do you guys stack up when you see people from the other branches? Do people give Coast Guard guys a hard time? Do they leave you alone? Are you superior to all of them? Like, talk to us about the dynamics of how that works. Or do people not really like me understand anything about the code and they just kind of let you be? Talk about that.
Right. That is a loaded question, Dylan.
Go ahead and use names.
Like you guys said, hey, we don't know a lot about fixed wing in the Coast Guard.
Yeah.
So that's a really good conversation starter, whether you're at a birthday party or a wedding reception. Everyone's like super interested because obviously the Coast Guard is the smallest of now the 6th armed services. So people just want to know like what you do, like the day in the life. What do you do? And everyone's like, so you're military, but you're not in DOD. And that's always a fun 5-minute explanation of how that works and different laws and authorities and stuff like that. So yeah, we do a lot of interagency work with the Army, Marine Corps, Air Force, and obviously we work with the law enforcement agencies, so state and local and federal law enforcement agencies. So we kind of bounce around based on our mission needs and who needs us when and where in the country.
All right. Well, Ron, I have a surprise for you here. Actually got a listener email from one of your friends here. It's some friends in Jacksonville.
Oh, nice. This should be good.
Yeah. It says, Ron B., it sounds like the Coast Guard is an awesome place to work and the fixed wing search and return cases are interesting, but we want to know more about the highly specialized, best of the best pilots who do the dangerous and extremely demanding counter-narcotics missions in Florida. That sounds like where all the Coast Guard aviation action is, the proverbial pointy end of the spear. Please tell us more about that little-known mission.
So, yeah, the Coast Guard aviation is very small. So the fact that I can tell you exactly who that listener was, that's how small the Coast Guard aviation is. So as every service branch like to rib on each other, I love getting the search and return or search and record is we get a lot with our camera. Our camera helps the helo guys get their air medals. So if you can't rib on yourself, right, who can you make fun of? So love our brothers and sisters out there in Jacksonville. They're doing the great work downrange in Central and South America, off the Caribbean, Eastern Pacific, stopping the drug trade. So kudos to those guys.
Wow. That's interesting. Well, I'm glad to hear that pilots can give each other a hard time, and no matter who they work for. That's some common ground we all have.
All right, Ron. It's ours and our listeners' favorite part of the episode, especially with people that have interesting flying jobs that none of us know anything about. So give us some good stories.
That's a pretty broad question. So like you have to narrow it in a little bit, right?
Wait, hold on. Let me rephrase it. Give us the best stories, Ron.
Giving the best stories. All right. This is a pretty cool story. This is my first big search and rescue case. So I was down in Miami and I think it was just a weekday. We were going out for a training flight. And so the alarm goes off. We're just going on a training flight and we're literally walking to the plane. The alarm goes off. I was a co-pilot at the time, talked to the aircraft commander. He says, hey, go figure out what's going on with the case, get the plane going. So go upstairs, figure out what's going on. There's we call it an overdue vessel. So there was a report last night of a vessel with 4 people on board off Lake Worth, Florida. So it was a husband, son, spouse, and I think a friend, something like there was 4 people. And so the mom, they were supposed to be home at say 10 o'clock from fishing. 10 o'clock rolls in. They're not home. She calls her husband. His phone goes right to voicemail. Calls the son. Phone goes right to voicemail. Calls the other 2 folks. Everyone's phone goes right to voicemail. So she gets pretty nervous. So 11 o'clock, she drives down to the marina. There's the truck. There's the trailer. No boat. So at about, I think 1 a.m., that's when she called the Coast Guard. And through working with the cell phone providers, they had all their numbers. They were able to get some data. And one of the people on board had been texting a friend. So they were able to get a GPS position several hours old, and they were able to figure out where the vessel was, they think, around midnight. So they were able to use that information based on the current and the winds and find out where they think this boat may be. So we get the call. We head out of Miami, obviously a pretty busy airspace working there. So go up off the coast of Lake Worth, start working our search and rescue pattern based on the current of the Gulf Stream. So on the second leg, we're coming down, heading southbound, and we see this shiny object. And there's the boat overturned with 4 people hanging on to it. So pretty exciting. And so the crew's pretty motivated. So we get the at-sea rescue kit. So it's at that time on that plane, it was 2 8-man life rafts with a survival kit. So we get that all rigged up and come over the boat and deploy this life raft, come back around. The life raft inflates. It has this CO2 cartridge in there. So life rafts inflate. They get into the life raft. The helicopter was coming in behind us. Obviously, we fixed it just a little faster, got up there and found the boat ahead of the helicopter. And then our small boat station out of Lake Worth, they were able to come out there and luckily all 4 people were saved and they were able to bring them on shore with the boat. Everybody made it. They got beat up pretty good with jellyfish and stuff like that. But my favorite part of the story is you don't usually get to see the people that you help save, but the mom tracked us down and came to the air station about a month later. And I remember we met her and the family and she just wouldn't let go of us. She's crying. She's like, you saved my family, because it was her whole family, husband, kids,
wow,
brother-in-law, sister-in-law. So it was pretty awesome to actually see that. And so it was it makes all those hard nights studying in flight school or getting through the academy, it makes it all worth it. That you saved 4 people's lives. It was a pretty awesome story.
Wow.
That is awesome.
Which brings me to a couple questions as you mentioned that.
Sure.
When you're doing that search and rescue grid that you said, how high are you normally when you're doing that?
So it depends usually on the weather and what we're looking for. So the Joint Rescue Coordination Center, we have the search and rescue controllers, and they'll take the winds and the weather and they'll put it into this program called, they call it SAROP. So Search and Rescue Operations. They put it in there based on all this data they can put in there. And a lot of times, especially off the coast of Florida, we deploy these satellite location data marker buoys. So it'll give you a drift on how fast the current, how fast the ocean's moving. So they know if you put something in the water and it's 4 knots of current in an hour, it's going to move 4 miles, right? So they have to figure out how far this boat probably drifted from when they got that GPS position, how far it drifted north if we're going to be out there at 9 a.m. So obviously that could have drifted for 9 hours if the piece of datum or data was at midnight. So we're out there looking, especially like for an overdue, like the people are missing.
Right.
Sometimes you get these like hoax Mayday calls and stuff like that, but we treat everything as it could be real. But obviously, like this is someone that says, my family didn't come home last night from fishing. Like there's 4 people out there missing.
Somebody's out there.
Yeah,
right?
somebody's out there, right? So, or like the sailboat case I was telling you off like Santa Barbara, like that somebody was out there, like getting a sailboat, and it's a single person. So that somebody's out there. So obviously take it pretty serious.
Oh, that's cool. Any other good ones for us? You have to have like a dumb sailor story, right? Or
Yeah, this is really bad. All right.
Perfect. This is
It's
what we're
perfect.
waiting for.
Perfect. All right, great.
This is good, right? So
Go ahead.
I was flying the HC-144. Hopefully this doesn't like hurt my chances of future jobs and stuff like that. But so I was flying the HC-144 and the plane was built in Sevilla, Spain by Airbus. Met the crew there in Spain. The plane was going through its final checks and signed the paperwork. Coast Guard signs for the plane. We accept the plane and we start heading back to North Carolina is where the plane had to go. But obviously a twin engine turboprop's not going to make it all the way from Spain to North Carolina. It's not a C-130. So it was January. So we're taking the south route. And so we were going to go to Tenerife to Cape Verde to Fortaleza, Brazil to Barbados, to Miami, to North Carolina, right?
Wow.
So kind of been a long day. They just had some minor things they were cleaning up on the plane, had to do a tire change. Anyways, so we get a late start and we land in Tenerife. So we get out of the plane and our crew chief comes out and he goes, "Hey, do you guys have the fuel cards?" I go, "No, why would I have the fuel cards?" I said, "You guys came from the depot facility that had the fuel cards. Why would I have the fuel cards?" And I was like, oh man. So now I'm in Tenerife with no fuel cards. So you're like, man, it's going to be a long night. So we call back east and talk to the base ops there. And they're like, yeah, we have your fuel cards. They're sitting right here. I'm like, well, at least they're not lost, I guess. It's like the glass is half full. So luckily we were able to get someone to make a copy of those and send them to the FBO. But every time we landed in a foreign country, I had these Xerox copies of our credit cards. They were just trusting that these weren't going to like bounce. They were going to go through. So I basically,
Look at these gold wings. Look at these gold wings.
Yeah.
I'm good for it.
This is on behalf of the United States government, ma'am.
Yeah,
Take my photocopy.
I know. It's basically like a string of IOUs.
And what is this, Dumb and Dumber?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You may want to hold on to those. It's like a briefcase full of IOUs. Yeah, we brought our copies of our credit cards on a piece of paper and trust of the U.S. government that we're going to pay our bill. So we told the guys who brought the next plane behind us and said, if they double charge you for fuel, this is why. But yeah, we left a string of IOUs across the Atlantic to try to bring that plane all the way to North Carolina from Spain. So kind of embarrassing, but it was kind of funny. But I was not the pilot in command, but I was also an aircraft commander and just the face of my friend when they go, "Do you have the fuel cards?" And I said, if they're asking if we have the fuel cards, and then I go, "Do you have the flight plans?" And they go, "No, why would I have the flight plans?" I go, "Yeah, why would I have the fuel cards?"
Oh my gosh. Well, it's amazing what a nice white, orange, and blue paint job will do for you to give you a little credibility.
Yeah, if you have a smile and a positive attitude, you get to 80% of the way there, right? Yeah.
That's funny. Well, many business aviation pilots listening to this interview have also forgotten the fuel cards. So
we've all been
there. Oh, okay.
you're
That makes me
in
feel
very
better
good
then.
company. They
Makes
don't
me feel
even
better.
need, I don't know. These days, who knows? Uncle Sam probably doesn't let you collect the Atlantic rewards, I'm guessing.
No Atlantic rewards. And it's funny too, because we have 3 different types of credit card in the plane, depending on where we're going for fuel. So, because we have a card for if we're going to a military base, we have a card if it has contract fuel through the DLA, and the DoD has a bunch of contract fuel. And then in an emergency, if you had to like use the special credit card, as we call it, like you better be calling someone if you're paying market price for gas. So, because obviously we take a few pounds of fuel to fill up a C-27.
Somehow, I don't know who figured it out, but they got Scottsdale approved for fuel stops. A couple of the branches somehow.
It's a government fuel provider. I always wondered that.
They always land about 8 p.m. and stay overnight and then head out the next day in the winter.
And get a crew car. And
they got it figured out.
They had to stop. It's the only
way there. It's the only place they could stop. So. Luke Air Force Base, it was too full. So anyways, Ron, this has been awesome. I learned a lot, especially, like I said, as a kid growing up, watching those helicopters fly by every day and not really understanding how it works. And then to hear that there's a fixed wing side, I think that is so cool. And what a great service you're providing, obviously, to all of the citizens of our country, and also a great avenue for folks that want to serve their country and be a professional pilot. So I'm excited for people to learn about that opportunity. We'll have some contact information for the Coast Guard and some of the stuff that you laid out in our show notes so that folks want to get more information about being an aviator for the Coast Guard. They can figure it out how to do it. We really appreciate it, Ron. Thank you so much.
Yeah, for the listeners, GoCoastGuard.com. I'm sure the guys will put a link there, and USCGA.edu for the Coast Guard Academy. But yeah, you guys can hook that up in the show notes. But yeah, it's a great opportunity. I've enjoyed being on the Coast Guard for the past 19 years and still enjoy flying every day. Got to fly this morning. It was pretty awesome, and keep it up.
Appreciate it, Ron.
All
Thank
right.
you very much.
Thanks for your service, Ron.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. All right. Thanks to Ron for imparting his wealth of knowledge on the fixed wing side of the Coast Guard. I learned a lot of things, and I got some of the burning questions I've had bouncing around in my head for many years. About
My favorite part about doing an interview with you, and when I know that there's a question that you really want to ask, is to see like how long you'll wait to ask that question like into the interview. At some point you get so tired of my dumb questions of like,
I finally can't take it anymore.
yeah, you're just like, all right, let's cut right to the chase. I need to know like what happens when you go down at 30 West. Like, let's get through this. So every interview,
Start at the
it's
beginning
yeah.
and tell me everything.
Yeah. And then you're just like, actually, hold on. So
Wait.
I loved it.
Do they rescue the golden retriever too? I'm sure there's other people that want to know about this and the origins.
I know.
too,
That's what's great. That's why we have a diverse set of hosts. It's the magic of the chemistry. Just watching you explode is my favorite part. Hopefully our new producer that we hire will also get to join us on these calls and watch you in the video. And
We can only hope.
He'll keep you calm. Well, thanks to our sponsors, Advanced Aircrew Academy, Harvey Watt, and Timothy P. Pope for supporting the show. We couldn't do it without you, so we certainly appreciate that. Thanks to all of our listeners for writing into the mailbag, writing reviews, and keep these flight advice questions coming. I think it's great. I've said before that I stole the flight advice segment from one of my favorite podcasters, who's Ryan Russillo, and they do something called life advice at the end of every show. I think I told you this before, Max. And so Lindsay and I listened to about 6 life advices in a row on our drive today. We had like a 3-hour drive. And she's just like, you guys just need to keep doing this. But she wants more questions that are like not like, should I take this job type related. So we're ready.
Listen, I am not taking my sister's advice about our show, okay? That's where I'm drawing the line here.
No, I think she's right though. Like, we're ready to help you out. Like, it just can't be like, should I commute or not? I mean, if you got other types of questions.
We've had people with mental health questions.
I know we've had. I'm just saying we get a lot of job
like,
questions.
what are you looking for?
Just
I feel like you have something you want someone to ask. What is it?
I'm just saying that the life of a pilot is complex.
Like, do you want people writing us about the relationship issues? Like, what are you looking for?
Well, maybe aviation related. Sure, that's fine. I'm just saying, like, if you've got like, listen, Max is an expert. He's reading these books. Like, if you have navigation questions, we're ready. If you have cockpit procedural questions, like, we're ready. That's all I'm going to say. We're ready.
Now you sound desperate. Let's wrap this up. I got to go.
All right. Well, that was it for episode number 83. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. We'll look forward to seeing you then. But until we launch another episode, remember,
flexibility is the key to air power. See you guys next time.
And there's a smart comeback to
There's
that.
this great comeback. I wish I could remember it.
Can you text that guy?
Nah, I don't think he even texts.
Does he have a flip phone? Did he put it into his leather flight case?
No, but he literally told me I'm not big with the text messages and stuff. So I don't think that dude sees a text from a number he doesn't recognize is not going to respond. I'm pretty sure it goes into that other folder he'd never accessed before.
So did he look at you and say, I'm not big into these text messages, as he powered down his flip phone and then click, put away his paper jet binder into his flight
That's
chart
one of my
case?
favorite. That's one of my favorite things to do is with a technically inept pilot. You know, it's just older people that just don't care, which honestly I totally admire, because if you just can get along and you can care less about tech, like, you're winning essentially. If you're living in the mid 80s, you're crushing, as far as I'm concerned. But I love, like, after a few days and you see them like over there, like doing something in a totally roundabout way on their iPhone or like in our company, like computer system or whatever. And you're like, hey, did you know about this? And you do this and you just watch their head explode in front of you. Oh my, what? Wait. And the readers come off of their chest from where they're hanging, and they put the reader glasses on. Wait a minute. I have to take my iPad off of the mount and bring it to the other side of the cockpit. No. Watch this. And you just tap something.
This is what I'm saying. This could be the flight advice segment. This is what I want.
Bring us your.
I just did that today. It's the funniest thing.
You're kidding me. My favorite's the like printing stuff out to like sign it and then scan it back in and like it's just,
No, that's what did you work with?
oh my god.
I'm going to send this for electronic No. I'll print it out.
I've got this. All right, guys.
All right.
Flexibility, ski, air power, blah blah blah. See you guys
next time. See ya.
The statements made in this show are our own opinions and do not reflect, nor were they under any direction from any of our employers.